So what if Congress held a hearing about a political scandal and most of the political media actually couldn't figure out what the scandal really is? That happened in Washington today, once again.
You're the head of this agency and you're not asking questions? Shame on you. Absolutely shame on you.
Congress gearing up for another big week of hearings on the IRS scandal.
A contentious hearing on the IRS controversy.
The House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform now in its 5th hour.
So far, we're not seeing this go high up the chain.
The people I represent believe the federal government is out to get them.
Not a single application was denied.
My question is, who's going to jail over this scandal?
I don't want to go to jail.
I don't want you to go to jail.
There's not a whole lot here other than incompetence, but there was still plenty of drama.
I am very proud of the work that I have done in government.
Lois Lerner, the head of the IRS Tax-Exempt Organization Division.
Members of this committee have accused me of providing false information.
Chose to plead the Fifth.
You don't get to tell your side of the story and then not be subjected to cross-examination.
I have not broken any laws.
That's not the way it works.
I have not violated any IRS rules or regulations.
She waived her right to Fifth Amendment privilege.
I have not done anything wrong.
She waived her right to Fifth Amendment privilege by issuing an opening statement.
South Carolina Republican Trey Gowdy.
That's not the way it works.
Does not understand the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Requiring organizations to be primarily engaged.
This is an area that requires additional clarity.
Is significantly different than requiring them to be exclusively engaged.
This has happened before, and it has not always been conservative groups.
A rare call for bipartisanship.
Let's all be Republicrats and Democrats today.
Demlicans? Demicans.
Or Donkel fans.
There you go.
Well, you heard it here first. The difference between the word exclusively and the word primarily. And that difference is huge. People who don't understand the difference between those two words, by which I mean congressional Republicans and virtually all of the political media, believe that the IRS has a huge scandal on its hands. Here is the first time America heard about the difference between the words exclusively and primarily in this context, and how changing those words was indeed an IRS scandal, a scandal that happened in 1959. Section 501c4 of the Internal Revenue Code, which defines social welfare organizations for tax-exempt purposes, defines them this way: civic leagues or organizations not organized for profit but operated exclusively for the promotion of social welfare. Then the IRS code does a magic trick and changes the meaning of the word exclusively. To be operated exclusively to promote social welfare, an organization must operate primarily to further the common good and general welfare of the people of the community. It was in 1959 that the IRS, on its own, added the notion that exclusively really just means primarily. So for 54 years, the IRS has gotten away with the crime of changing the word exclusively to primarily. That was last Monday, but as expected, it did nothing to dim the political media's lust for scandal. I continued to harp on the point all week, and then Friday, at the House Ways and Means Committee hearing, where the members of that committee are supposed to be sort of experts in taxation, came the first glimmer that someone in Congress was actually listening.
As Mr. Lawrence O'Donnell, as the crew group, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington has pointed out in a petition, you are to be denied this status if you are not exclusively engaged in social welfare according to the statute.
Then came the Senate Finance Committee hearing yesterday, where the Senate's real experts on taxation, the staff of the Senate Finance Committee, made sure that the chairman asked the key question.
How does the IRS justify regulations that weaken the standard from exclusively to primarily?
Like many of the questions at these hearings, no one really answered it. But senators kept pressing the point, while Republicans and the political media remained blissfully oblivious to the language of the law.
I didn't see a vote for primarily. I saw a vote for exclusively, because we wanted to limit the scope of who could avail themselves of the benefit of a 501c4 under the tax code.
What does the term primarily for social welfare mean? The IRS has not made that clear when the statute says exclusively, and that's really at the root of so many of these problems.
Some of the thoughtful members of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform showed in today's hearing that they were paying attention to Congressman Lloyd Doggett last week and to the Senate Finance Committee yesterday.
The original statute passed by Congress requires 501c4 organizations engaged exclusively in social welfare activities. But in 1959, the Treasury Department issued a regulation that requires these entities only to be primarily engaged in social welfare activities. As a result, many groups now believe they can spend up to 49% of their funds on campaign-related activities.
The seed was planted for something bad to happen when somehow the interpretation of a law was changed from exclusively to primarily.
Requiring organizations to be primarily engaged in social welfare activities is significantly different than requiring them to be exclusively engaged in social welfare activities. Wouldn't you agree?
It is, Congresswoman.
All right, Mr. Shulman, would you agree?
Yes.
There is the commissioner of the IRS during this so-called scandal saying that there is a big difference between organizations being exclusively engaged in social welfare and primarily engaged in social welfare. That there's a difference between the law and the IRS's official interpretation of the law in their regulation. How big a difference?
Clearly, a Mack truck is being driven through the 501c4 loophole.
But don't expect the political media to notice the Mack truck. Don't expect them to pay any attention to points like this when someone walks into a congressional hearing and takes the Fifth Amendment, because nothing arouses the political media's scandal lust like someone taking the Fifth Amendment. And so, of course, they didn't even notice when Congresswoman Jackie Speier got the oh-so-careful and bureaucratically precise Inspector General to admit that at the heart of his report is a crime he chose not to specifically identify in his report.
If regulation can't trump statute, then everything that's been going on here relative to authorizing 501c4s, if they're not exclusively being used for social service purposes, is violative of the law, correct?
I would say yes.
Violative of the law, which is to say against the law. The IRS in 1959, without authority from Congress, changed Congress's intent, and 501c4 organizations suddenly had to be primarily for social welfare, which meant from that day forward, IRS agents somewhere, Washington or Cincinnati or somewhere, were going to have to evaluate how much politics a 501c4 applicant was going to engage in. But by either standard, the standard of the law as written by Congress or the standard of the regulation as misinterpreted by the IRS, any organization with the name of a political party in its title of any size, from the Democratic Party to the Tea Party, to local Tea Parties, to the Socialist Workers' Party, to the Green Party, every single such application should have been rejected for 501c4 status as a matter of law.
Not a single application for this status, this tax-exempt status, was denied.
And so, the real scandal here is not that those applications were delayed, but that they were ever approved. But once the political media has latched on to the paradigm of a scandal, once they've collectively fixed its frame around what they think are the relevant elements of that scandal, it is inescapable. And from that point forward, that frame, And the media is incapable of processing any new information that can show the political media just how wrong they have been.